Welcome to another episode on Just for the Modders. This is episode 10. On today's episode, we are going to be looking at the SKX013 and we're going to do a movement upgrade from the current 7S movement to the NH36 movement. First of all, I want to start off by saying a massive apology to everyone who has tuned into this channel and is on the lookout for newer videos. I haven't uploaded a video for the past month or so. I've been really busy on my first channel, which is the Watcher, reviewing watches, etc. So finally got around to doing this. Now, if you have been following this channel, this was my first project along with the Monster Gen 1. So basically, I've been refurbing this SKX013. The things I've done to date is I've changed the crystal to a sapphire chamfered AR coated from I think CT Mods or something. I've also changed the bezel insert and I've actually now replaced the full bezel. Originally the bezel was a bit damaged, so done a bit of rework on it, but I still wasn't happy. And on eBay one day a used bezel popped up, bought it, swapped out the insert. So today's video is going to be swapping out the movement with the NH36 and also replacing the crown. You have to replace the crown and stem to an upgraded NH35. The stem from the NH35 will actually work in a 7S if I'm not mistaken, but it won't work the other way around. And so let's go ahead, let's start off the video and let's start dismantling this watch and start replacing the movement. With the case back removed, we can go ahead and begin to remove that stem. In order to do that, you've got to press down on this little release lever, and once you've pressed that down, you can pull the stem and the crown out. Then just dislodge the movement slightly, flip it over, and we've got the movement out with the dial and the hands. Now with the SKX013, the chapter ring is not actually under the crystal, it's just placed on top of the dial. It's not stuck down or anything, and so we can just remove that, put that to the side. We then use a movement holder because we now need to take off the hands. Now, because this movement doesn't hack, you'll need to line up the hands, the hour and the minute, and then just wait for the seconds hand to come into alignment and then pull them off. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the Bergeron dial protector, and I've used I've actually bought a new hand pulling tool, and now pretty easy to use. You just get in underneath the hour hand, press down on the sides as you see, and the center shaft on that hand puller, that will press down and it will pull the hands off without you having to do any pulling yourself. We now need to start off by prying off the dial, and we need to get underneath so we can see the day and date windows on the movement. Next step is to actually remove that day window. Now it's important to remove that day window because that needs to get transferred to the new NH36 that we're going to use. The reason is the NH36 normally comes at a 3 p.m. or 3 o'clock crown. Now with the date disc here, it's for a 4 p.m. or 3:50, whatever you want to call it. So we do need to swap them out, otherwise you will have a misaligned date. Now in order to do that, I use a very thin screwdriver, and there's a C-clip right under the pinion or that center stem, and you just carefully slide it underneath and pry it off. Don't be too forceful, otherwise that C-clip will just fly off. As you can see, it's pretty easy just to slip the screwdriver underneath and just turn it side to side. Once that has been removed, just keep it to the side, keep it safe, and we need to now remove the date disc. I use you can use, it's easy to come off. You can just use some blue tack and pull it off, or I've just slid some tweezers underneath, lifted it off. Now there's a little gearing date, just take that, keep these parts safe, you might need them afterwards. When you do replace it on the NH36, that wheel is also present, so you can use that one or you can use the one that you have. The next step here, we now need to remove this black plastic movement holder. Now the grey plastic movement holder on the NH36 will not fit the case on the SKX013 or the SKX007. It actually will fit, we have to squeeze it in pretty tight, but what you want to do is you want to swap the holders over. There's a difference in thickness, that's all there is, and it's easily done. You know, don't fret because you're touching a movement, as long as you're not forcefully pressing into the back to mess with that flywheel. You should be okay. Easy as that, as you've seen me do it. Just go around, clip it off, and then we can now get NH36. Once we get that ready by removing the stem that's in there, we can start off by replacing the movement holder. I think that's the first step because that's the most fiddliest job. Once we do that, swapping out the date disc is a piece of cake. And so let's go ahead, remove that movement holder on the NH36 and swap them over. Now, swapping them over, it is very fiddly. I've fast forwarded through this. What you need to do is where you see on the sides of the movement holder those little holes for the dial feet, those protrusions, sorry, you need to fit them in first. So you fit one side in effectively because it's plastic. You want to stretch out the other side and get it to go under the date disc. Now that is extremely difficult. What you can do is actually remove the date disc, but that requires a lot more disassembly. It will add significant time onto your mod, and also you need to reassemble it once done. I will make a separate video on how to do that. But for the most part, just messing around with it, just keep trying to press it, just pull it from one side as far as you can, and then it will require slight adjustments. It is a bit of a knack point, meaning you just need to do it in order to figure it out. There is no clear steps, 1, 2, 3. It is something which you just need to fit on. It will take you a long time the first time doing it, but once you're there, like I said, you can be a bit vigorous with the movements. They're not that sensitive, so just make sure it is pretty safe. But as you can see, as I've just took some time myself, eventually I've managed to get it on and then just work around the whole movement holder to make sure it is clicked in. It will fit on perfectly. Once that's done, we're ready to take off and swap out the date disc. So you just follow the same process that we did on the 7S movement. Slip in that screwdriver. It has to be a very thin one and a very small one. Take off that C-clip, keep it safe, and then we can just remove that date disc from the NH36 movement. Once that's removed, you'll see the gear cog is still present. We don't need to swap that over, and we just get the date disc from the 7S movement and just press it on. Now, in order to make that catch the wheel, it's as simple as placing the date disc on and just rotating it with your fingers until you'll actually feel it settle down. You'll feel it sit flush. Once that's sat down, you can further test that by just rotating the date function to make sure that the date is moving and clicking just right. If it hasn't sat down or it's not rotating correctly, then just don't worry about it and just keep rotating it. You will actually feel it catch and it will settle itself down. You can also place the dial on top just to double check the position. So line up the dial feet from the original dial, and then just in the date window, just make sure that the date disc and the date wheel do actually line up, and then that is perfect. And then we can actually put the C-clip back on to secure that date wheel to the actual movement. Now, in order to replace that C-clip, just lift that C-clip up and put it over the actual center shaft. Once you've done that, use the tips of your tweezers to press down firmly, and that C-clip will then click itself into place. Just double check and make sure that is seated, and that will keep the date disc secure. So the dial and the hands have been reassembled. We're going to put that movement within the case. The chapter ring has also been applied to the dial. Fit the case simply over the whole movement and dial assembly, and just make sure you double check for alignment. And once you're happy with the alignment, we now need to move on and start sizing up a new stem and applying the new S crown. Once you have screwed in that crown into your uncut NH36 stem, ensure you press it in and make sure it is clicked all the way in. We now need to measure how much of the stem we will need to cut. Get a hold of some calipers, and you want to measure the distance between the end of the crown tube to the start of your crown, as you can see there. So ensure both tips of the caliper are touching both points, end of the crown tube and the start of the crown. Now that is the distance or the length of stem you actually need to trim so the crown does sit in nicely within the crown tube. And so that's 8mm. So what we then need to do is pull the stem back out, unscrew obviously the crown, and line it up with that measurement. Use a permanent marker just to create a marking. Now I'm going to fast forward through this bit, but just talk you through what I'm doing in order for it to make sense to you guys. So basically, with the marking done, you place the stem within, I've got this micro SS drill bit, whatever, vise, or you can just use some pliers, and cut extra, and then always bring it back down. Every time you do make a snip, you've got to make sure you file down the sides to remove any burr, and what you've got to do, just keep replacing the crown. If it doesn't fit right, take it back out, shave a bit more off, put it back in, obviously after replacing the crown, just to make sure it does fit. I had to do this twice over to make sure everything did fit right. And the last stage of this, once you're happy with the length of the stem, is apply a touch of Loctite to the end, screw the crown back down and press it in, make sure everything works, and you're good to go. Once that's done, apply some silicone grease to the Caseback gasket if it is in good working order. Close up the Caseback, and that's it. We are ready to go, rock and roll. The mod has been completed. So there we have it, everyone. All the hard work finally completed, finished. To recap, we've replaced the older, outdated 7S movement and updated it with the NH36. We've also had to use a new stem, and therefore we replaced the crown with an upgraded aftermarket signed crown. What are your thoughts on this build? So how was the instruction? How was the video? Now, you know, it's something which everyone can do. I learned from the very start, a lot of these projects, a lot of these tasks do take a lot of time. You know, I've cut so much out of the video. So you do need a bit of patience, a bit of time if you are considering modding yourself. The thing is, these movements, they cost me 20 quid. So don't be afraid. Just buy another movement, buy two in case you mess one up, and buy a few stems, because no doubt in starting this up, you are going to make errors. I've been through countless stems before I ever got my first stem just right, and I had to watch other videos to do it. I've damaged cases, broken bezels, broken bezel inserts. You know, it's part of the learning journey. You know, if you want to mod a special project for yourself, you do need to try beforehand, before you apply all your skills to that one project. As I mentioned, I'll be doing another video on just how to, you know, assemble a handset on a watch. I'll also review the different kind of tools that you can use. Also, let me know in the comment section your thoughts on this video and the mod. Thank you everyone, and I'll see you on the next episode.